Hello to all and a warm welcome and to all who join us on this fourth webinar in a series of 5 on impact. And to be more precise about the subject of this series of webinar, it is about understanding the impact of digital cultural heritage in digital transformation. So to support professionals of the cultural heritage institutions in the Europeana network or outside the network, and to getting a grip on the meaning and relevance of impact assessment. So, my name is Maaike Verberg, and I am a director of Den Foundation, which is a Dutch knowledge institute, and we empower the cultural institutions in the Netherlands in their digital transformation. And we are proud to be a partner of Europeana in several programs. And for now, I'm moderating this webinar because I'm also the chair of the Impact Steering Group in Europeana. And first, to get this out of the way, we have some housekeeping advice. Nicole was already asking you to share who you are on the chat. So please do. I'm also inviting you to do that. Now you are on mute and your video is off. So this is a way to introduce yourself to everybody who is participating, to introduce yourself to the speakers. So you can do that in the chat function. You can also use the chat function to introduce anything emerging from or during the presentation or discussion. Please do so. But if you have a really focused question for one of the speakers or for me as a moderator, please direct it to us in the Q&A. We are recording this webinar, and it will be recorded, including the discussion that we have at the end. And I also really kindly invite everybody who has not yet join the Europeana Impact community. You will get a link for this community somewhere along this webinar in the chat. So thank you. This is the first webinar in this new year. So to see how we have linked these series of webinars, I want to take you through the first webinars, just a short introduction. The first webinar was in September 2020, and it was an overall introduction on what we mean by impact. And this overall introduction was followed by a series of webinars that walk through the different steps of the Europeana Impact Playbook, which you see on the slide right here. The second webinar was dedicated on designing your impact assessment, and this phase 1 of the Impact Playbook has over 2,500 downloads, which we are very, very excited about. And if you have downloaded it, if you're using it, please share your experience with us. We are very curious how you, what your practice is with this Impact Playbook. So the third webinar was on phase 2, and it was on data collection and on data analysis as part of the impact assessment. And this phase 2 of the playbook is now in a beta version available, and it's not yet finished. So all comments on this beta version are very welcome and very warmly received. And I have to remind you, I really want to remind you that these 3 webinars are still available for you online on the Europeana website. Now this 4th webinar. This is dedicated on how you narrate and share the story of your impact assessments. And this phase 3 of the playbook is currently a work in progress. And Nicole, one of the speakers, is coordinating this program, this process. So we present you with some important insights on how to build and engage your narrative on impact. And we really, of course, appreciate your insights too. The program that we have today, shown on this slide, we start off with 3 presentations by Nicole McNeely and Beth Daly of the Europeana Foundation and Lorena Aldana Ortega of Europa Nostra. Then we have questions and discussions with us all, attendees and speakers together. And last, but certainly not least, we want to give an example of practice what we preach. And we have invited Magda, a live graphic note taker, to interpret and to visualize this webinar live. We will try to turn to her in between some presentation if time allows us, but we will certainly give Magda ample opportunity at the end to show us the results of what she did during this webinar and tell us more about her creative process, how to build a narrative in a live setting. That is very interesting. So I hope you can join us until 4:30 this afternoon. And now, please, I want to give the floor to the beautiful ladies that are also in your screen to introduce themselves to you, so you know who is part as a speaker of this webinar. And can I give a word first to Magda?
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Magda, as Micah said, and I'm the graphic illustrator for this session, which means I will be the person who listens to the speakers like the most from the group, like constantly listening and drawing. And I'll just show you what I work with. This is my graphic tablet and a pen. So these are my tools, and I hope to show you more of my work during this session. So see you in a bit.
Beth, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everybody. So my name is Beth Daly and I'm editorial advisor at the Europeana Foundation, which means that I support comms, communications across the organisation, but with a particular focus on supporting everything to have a consistent strategic message and also a consistent tone of voice so that everything sounds like Europeana and everything comes together to give the same message across the board. So I'm going to share a little bit later some of the tools that we use to do that every time we put together a story or a communication.
Great, looking forward to that. And last, Lorena. Oh no, not last, sorry.
Thank you, Mike. Yes, hello everyone. My name is Lorena Aldana. I am the European Policy Coordinator at Europa Nostra. For those who don't know, Europa Nostra is the largest pan-European federation of heritage NGOs, active in more than 45 countries in Europe and beyond. And what I do at Europa Nostra is I'm in charge of our advocacy efforts with the EU institutions. So I'm based in Brussels. And I will show you later on one very concrete example of an advocacy tool that we have been using to put cultural heritage at the center of the EU policy agenda. And yeah, just let me thank Europeana for the invitation. We have been collaborating quite a lot, Europeana and Europa Nostra, and especially in the past year. So I'm very excited to be here and to share with you what we do.
Great to have you, Lorena. Nicole.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm super excited to be here today. It's quite nerve-wracking. So I'm responsible for the development of the impact framework, and that includes the impact playbook. And so today, of course, we're talking about phase 3, hence the nerves, because it's still in development. So I'm also responsible for conducting impact assessments in the organisation, working with my colleagues and others in the Europeana network to use the tool and to collect cases of how it's being used, and again to continually improve our processes. And yeah, thank you everyone for joining again.
So Nicole, you're up first in this program, so please start with your story.
Great, I'll just make sure I have remote control. So yes, I'm hoping this, let me see if it's working. Yes, there we go. Here we have a very skeleton vision of what phase 3 of the Impact Playbook might look like. Phase 3 is dedicated to narrating our impact story. And so phase 3, we're hoping will take us all the way through from analysing and interpreting the data we've collected, through building the narrative, presenting this in a way that we hope people will engage with, a process of validation and review, through to publication and dissemination, getting your findings to the right people. And then also about using your findings. So it's about not just collecting data or making reports so it can sit on a shelf. It's about actually using the data in a way that can bring value to your organization and also to the sector and everyone else. So in a way, you can sort of think this through from writing the reports, getting it validated, getting it seen by some people before you publish, and then using it. Sort of boil it down. And we're always in the process of learning by doing. We're in the process of publishing potentially 9 or 10 impact assessments reports next February. I say next February, that's next month. It felt like a long time away when I wrote this actually, but that's next month, that's in several days. So we're hoping to publish a number of impact assessments in late February. And the focus of these are very varied. So we will think of learning outcomes, network development, much more in that sense, but also economic impact and environmental impact assessments. But today, and with this idea of learning by doing and thinking about what we're learning as we're doing it, I'll reflect a bit on Europeana 2020 and the conference we held in November last year. So this was a hugely successful conference. Harry is there. I don't know if Heen is in the conference, but Tamara, who's also here, was responsible for this. We had around 900 people make their personal programs on the conference software. So we're estimating that we had around 900 people attending the sessions, not every session, of course, but around 900 people attending the program at some point. And so our data collection method was to send a post-event survey to those participants. We had around 224 responses, which is quite a lot out of 900. We're super thrilled. If any of you here were at the conference and filled in the survey, thank you, it matters, and we do use the data. And for us, we're building not only on, we're not approaching this as if it was a standalone event. We're building on what we learned about Europeana 2019. We'll also be publishing the impact assessment report of 2019 also in February. And we're thinking also about learning outcomes, network development, and also about environmental impact assessment, even though, of course, this was a completely digital event. So I hope you can read this. I think it may be a little bit hard to read the pink, I apologize. So going through the first of the 6 steps of phase 3, analysis and interpretation. And some things I was learning as going through the data analysis this month is about creating some dedicated diary time. Analyzing numbers can be very fast. Analyzing the open text responses can be exceptionally slow, especially when you have 224 responses. And I'm very thankful for everyone who fills in the open text responses, because that's where the real richness is, but it takes time to get there in terms of actually extracting everything you need to know. So we're not finished that process just yet, but we will be soon. And a question you also have to ask is, what are you looking for when you're doing this analysis? Look back to the change pathway and also consult with the team. What were the objectives of the event you're trying to analyze? Also to think about how much detail do you need? What sort of level of analysis is important? For example, for us, is it important to know about the difference of perspectives of Europeana network members versus non-members? Is it important to know about people who are over the age of 30 versus people under the age of 30? Understanding the sort of level of detail you need will help you plan for your analysis and also and help you think through the findings in terms of who you're presenting them to and making sure what you present is relevant. And really importantly, the time frame in which you have to deliver. For us, that's next month. So the pressure is on. And in that sense, it's also important to think about actually the review process and setting in those times for review. Step 2 of the 6, building the narrative. And Beth is our expert here and she'll talk through this in more detail. But I thought it might be interesting to just share my own perspective, and I've used this in a number of our impact case studies. So when I come to structuring a narrative, the first step is really, what are the answers to the questions that we asked? So if it's an interview, what did people say? If it's a survey or a questionnaire, what did people respond? How many people said X occurred for them? But the next step is really going back to the research question. Well, what did we want to know? What's the top level question? And how does the answers to those questions help us answer that bigger question about what people, in this case, what people experienced at Europeana 2020? And then the third step for me is almost like an edit, the sort of edit process, when you say, actually, what will the sector and their stakeholders need to know? And this is really asking the question of, does everyone want to know what I want to know? Which I don't think they do. I think people want a report which sets out the most important, most relevant information. But we also put the details somewhere in the report. For us, for me, at the moment, that's in our appendices. So we try and put as much detail as possible in a place where people can access it if they need it. Otherwise, we follow a very standard report structure, including an executive summary. And for Europeana 2020, our narrative is very much also in comparison with what happened in 2019, what we're learning as we're going through analysing our events. Step 3, visualization and presentation. Again, Magda will be here to, Magda and Lorena will both give great insights into this step. But from my perspective, it's very important not just to present data, use it to answer the questions. And also, even if visualization helps you absorb information quickly, you still need to tell people what the graph or the table shows. You can't just assume that people know what it shows, and you also have to explain why it's significant to the point you're trying to make. The accessibility of the content is really important. And this is actually one of the reasons why we're slightly later publishing our impact assessments, is because we've gone through a process about thinking how we can make what we're publishing more accessible. So this includes, for example, color contrast, thinking about color blindness. There's a program I use called Data Wrapper that have a really great color blindness checker for charts, for example. So you can check that everyone will be able to actually see the contrast in your charts. And so we're working also to try and make our PDFs as accessible as possible, but also asking the question, do we need to have PDFs? And if we do, then it's unfortunate. But where we can, I think our approach is now to try and put, it's not unfortunate, sorry, that's the wrong word, but where we can, we're trying to put things on web pages. So it's as accessible as possible, for example, to screen readers. And branding and consistency. And this is, again, where you might get, you might not be the expert, but get the expertise of your colleagues. Getting brand colors in your reports is really effective. And I think what Lorena will present later is a really beautiful example of how color can be a really effective tool for presenting data and creating a very memorable story. And being consistent throughout the report is important, because I find that sometimes when I read, I get a little bit distracted if things are a little bit off, even if the data is very strong and the narrative is very strong. Moving quickly on, validation and review. And this is if you're a bit of a perfectionist, if you sometimes find feedback as criticism, which sometimes some of us can be like, this can be a hard stage. It's about getting, what you've worked on to other people, getting their perspectives, who can help you reflect on and interpret the findings and your analysis. In this case of Europeana 2020, it's the delivery team, it's my colleagues, and it's the Members' Council as well, who went into so much effort to help plan the programme. Who needs to see the analysis before it's published? Again, it's the team and the Members' Council. But there's another question of who else could add value to your analysis before it's published? Not who has to, but who could. And in this case, it's not the respondents, but in other cases, for example, when we've conducted an impact assessment through an interview program, we have, or I've gone back to the interviewees and said, well, what do you think of the report? Tell me, have I interpreted what you said correctly? And this is even in the case where the interview data is used anonymously. It's more to add value to the findings, to the narrative, and to check that my interpretation has been correct. And it's all about helping to make a story of impact that makes sense. Point 5, publication and dissemination. Again, I'm not the expert, and I have wonderful colleagues who are. So I'm going to rely on them a lot for this stage, and so I recommend you do too. When does our report have to be published? Well, it's next month. How? Well, a full report and a summary, also a web page and a blog post. And how do we share it with the people who need and want to read it? Well, we have a number of communication channels. We have Europeana Pro, we have a Europeana Impact community as well. And of course, we have our partners and different conferences and events where we can publish this. And using the findings, my last point and the last point of what I think will be in phase 3. So using the findings internally, well, I hope that we'll use this to shape our future events, that we'll present the findings to our colleagues and stimulate a discussion, for example, on the benefits of an all digital event versus a hybrid event versus a physical only event. And I hope it will also encourage a discussion around the environmental implications of having physical events. So I mentioned that we're doing an environmental impact assessment, and we'll see what it says in terms of, you know, there is an environmental impact by having people online as well as having people travel. We'll also use this internally to help improve our processes for measuring the impact of our events. And externally, and this is also super important, I really hope that this impact assessment will help us to support others to understand the impact of their events, to plan more impactful events, to think about actually, you know, how you can have the most impact for your attendees and the community around you. And so I do hope that you will read the report when it comes out, and there's probably 8 other ones joining it as well, so set a week aside. But it will be available on impact.tools. We have a bit of work to get it out, but we will also email all of the impact community. And at this point, it is also a good to follow up on what Micah mentioned. Please do consider joining the impact community. You can do this via the Network Association, which is a free association to join with lots of benefit for those working in the cultural heritage sector and the wider cultural sector. So please do consider joining. And the link is in the chat. And thank you very much. I've gone over by 2 minutes. I'm sorry.
No, this is great. 2 minutes leeway we do have, Nicole. Thank you so much. I think it is very relevant to also have impact assessments on events. They are very important in the cultural sector, also in the cultural heritage sector. And as I just see how policy discussions are moving towards in the Netherlands, and I'm also curious how that is in other European countries, you know, policy discussions really move towards more impact assessments than towards clicks and numbers of attendees or newsletter subscriptions. So these kind of groundwork is very important. So thank you, Nicole. And well, I don't see any really questions for you for this moment. So I want to turn to Beth Daly to give her presentation, and then turn to Magda after Beth, because I think we have time for that. So Beth, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Micah. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to talk about some of the general principles that we put into practice anytime we try to produce a story or a strategic communication. So this applies to impact, but it applies equally to anything else your organization might do from a communications perspective. And I'm going to take the assumption that you've worked through the impact playbook and all the steps that Nicole has just gone through, and that you've got probably quite a big report with lots and lots of information in it, statistics, data, survey responses, quotations, insights, all of this. And you're at the point where you want to do something with it, tease something out, and tell a specific a version of that story to a specific audience or group of stakeholders. So the very first thing that I would encourage you to do, if I have control of the screen, I think I do, is to use your communications team. Now, this might vary depending on your organization. You might have a huge marketing and communications team. You might have a single person who's in charge, does a bit of social media, or who helps with blogs or what have you. But whoever you have, whatever form it takes in your organization, go to them at the beginning of this process and talk to them about what it is you want to achieve, because they will be able to help you with selecting the right format, making sure that you are working within the messaging of your organization, that you're using the appropriate tone of voice. They can help you with how to promote it, how to disseminate it, what channels are available, and help you with your plannings and timings, because you don't want your important impact story to be planning to go out on the same day as some other big message that's going out from your organization. So first things first, talk to your comms team, okay? And then we can start to think about the story that we're going to tell. And so I was reading a book over Christmas. It's this one, The Starless Sea. And it's all about stories and libraries. And it thinks about the theory of stories. And I came across this paragraph and I thought it was perfect for talking about impact. So I'll just read it to you. They're talking about stories and the character says, each one's different. They have similar elements though. All stories do, no matter what form they take. Something was and then something changed. Change is what story is, after all. And I just thought was perfect for impact, because you're talking about what change you wanted to achieve and looking at what change actually happened and then being able to talk about it. So that's really good to remember, that change is where the story is. And as it says, all stories have similarities, and I'm going to go through some of those things that we need to consider every single time now. So the first thing, what is it you want to achieve by telling this story? What do you want people to do? What is your call to action? And you might tell different versions of your impact story, or for a different reason, depending on who you're talking to and what you want them to do. You might want to present to your board so that you can go in a particular direction that's evidenced by your impact report. You might be talking to local businesses to get them to support or participate in something. You might be addressing your museum audience, wanting them to sign up to something. So what is that thing that you want them to do? And what is the thing that they care about? Because if you can work that out, what these people care about, you can make them feel what you want them to feel. And that's when you can get them to do what you want them to do. Okay, so what is it you want to achieve with this story? Why are you sharing it? Secondly, and I've just touched on this already, who's involved in this story? We've got two sets of people. Within your story itself, you have your characters. Who are you talking about? And what do they need? How does your story address their needs? Which you will hopefully have that information in your impact report. And then who are you talking to? Which group of stakeholders? Again, earlier in the impact playbook, I think you may have done a stakeholder mapping. So you should have worked out who your stakeholders are, which groups they are, and looked at what their needs are. So it might be a good idea to revisit that at this point and think, who are you talking to? What do they need? And how does my story, how does this work about impact address their needs? And then once you've thought about that, you can start to think about your plot, your narrative. As I mentioned, you've got a big report with lots of information in it. If you're teasing something out of it, you won't be able to share every single thing that's in that report. Although that might be your call to action. It might be, we want you to read our full report. That might be one thing that you're trying to achieve. So what are the main points? Which focus matches your audience's needs? And also, what can you leave out? Because like I say, you won't be able to choose absolutely everything. And I think it's important to remember at this point to tell the story that you've discovered, not the story that you set out to discover, which might be something very different. So really look at your evidence and your insights that you've achieved and think, what are the main points? And I would start to write down the outline of that story, or the skeleton, if I may, because I found this nice image. And I would write that as a list of bullet points, and I would try to organize it with my most important one first. Okay, so at this point, I would just stop and pause and think, okay, I've got what I think I want to share. I think I know who I'm talking to. I want to stop and pause and think, does this story that I've noted down in bullet points match the story that my organization is telling about itself as well? Because that's what we want to do. So with Europeana, we've articulated our own narrative through things like a mission and a vision statement, a set of values and a set of key messages. And every time we work on a strategic piece of communication, we go back to these things. We make sure that our story is taking those things on board and advancing the mission, because you want your impact story to fit into the story your organization wants to tell about itself, because that's when it's most powerful, when those two things work in harmony. And again, go back to your comms team because they can help. Okay, so then we sit down to write our story. And I've got 3 slides left, and these are all tips for writing. And I use these in editorial workshops with colleagues to help everybody write consistently and engagingly. So my top tip would be that we always write for a busy person. We all have so little time, so much information coming at us from everywhere, and we need to do as much as we can to help people to navigate through the story we're telling them, to see it, to understand it, to want to carry on reading it. So I would keep it simple. Make sure you use short paragraphs, short sentences, short words even, and simple punctuation, and keep it as plain language as you possibly can. Okay. And then think about the structure. And I think this applies whether you're doing a text, like a news post or a blog post, or whether you're thinking about video or a presentation or a podcast. Whatever you do, make sure that everything is split up. You break it all up. So you have sections, titles, subheadings. You might have lists or images or graphics from your report that you could use. But also remember about space. Give things space or silence or time, or a visible space, white space on the page, because it all helps to break it up, and it all helps you to be able to see at a glance what's going on and to know that you can work your way through it. I'd also say front load your information, which means make sure the most important things go first, and that bullet point list that I mentioned earlier will help you to organize those thoughts. So the most important things go at the top of your news post or at the beginning of your video, whatever it might be. And again, every paragraph itself should have its most important element first. And then to make sure everything flows nicely together, try and think about the whole thing as an arc. So you have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and each paragraph links to the next one sensibly. So read them out and see if you get, if it's confusing, or if you're moving from two completely different topics to each other and they don't go smoothly. What can you do? It might be you need to reorder, or it might be that you need to use a subheading as a bridge, perhaps from one paragraph to another. So think about how each bit flows into the next. And then finally, down to the words that we use. So it's really important to use words that your reader would use themselves and they're easy to understand. And as you've been going through the playbook, you've been very familiar with its terminology. But if you're going to use, when you're addressing your audience, you need to think about the terminology that they would understand as well. So there may be much of it that applies, but there may be some elements that you think, actually, I need to rephrase that differently because my audience won't be familiar with that kind of language. So use titles, headings, and link text that are specific and descriptive, and that's for a couple of reasons. One, so that it's easily understandable, and one, so that people will type into Google the thing that you've included in your blog post, for example. You don't want to be too whimsical or try to be clever with your titles and headings. I think they should be specific and to the point, or to quote an advert that we had in the UK, it does what it says on the tin. So it tells you what to expect and then it delivers. Okay. Two last ones. I would really recommend that you use an active voice and not a passive voice in your communications. So that means that your communications take responsibility, that they're more immediate and can connect with the audience. So I'll give you an example, which I'm sure you will all have, you will all nod along with. And we many times hear politicians, for example, say, mistakes were made. That's passive. Imagine the response they would get if they said, I made a mistake. That shows responsibility and connection. You can identify with them. And that's what you want from your impact story. We want to be able to identify and connect with it. So finally, you've written it all. My advice would be to put it away for a day, come back to it, and then declutter it. Do a Marie Kondo on it. Take out any words that are repeated, any ideas even that are repeated, or edit, and make time for that editing. Nicole talked about putting time in the diary at the beginning. Make sure you put time in the diary for editing, because it's really quite cathartic as well. And it's like sculpting that piece of marble to find the statue within it. And as you can guess, that's something that I quite enjoy. So they're my top tips. I hope that's useful. Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. Beth, I have a question for you. When listening to you, and you're also addressing our attendees with their knowledge about Impact Playbook phase 1. So if I have that change pathway before me, which I probably think that many of you also can imagine, that canvas with the change pathway, which we're also, when we make this impact assessment, start at the right-hand side of this change pathway. I really hear when you are saying that the story is also about what the change that you want to make. Is it something that you think that the comms team should also be part of this very first building block of the impact assessment? What are your thoughts?
I would say that it's very useful to involve your comms team at the beginning of most things. Yeah, I genuinely think that's true. So yeah, a conversation at the beginning might really be quite useful for both parties. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you for your presentation. I think there is enough stuff to talk about, but let's turn to Magda, because I'm really curious what she has drawn about your writing tips, which is quite a thing to do. So Magda, please, can you show us your work so far? Give us a glimpse.
Yes, I can. I just cannot share my screen as I don't have the remote. That's interesting. Oh, I can now. So please have a look. This is so far what we've done here, and the part on the left is Nicole's part, and then in the middle section of the drawing, you have some tips on how to turn your reports into stories, and some space left for the third speaker, or Lorena. Okay.
Okay.
I think that
it looked great. It was really much to take in, but you'll take us through it in detail.
Yes.
In a few moments. But first, let's finish your canvas with the story of Lorena. Can you unmute yourself?
So
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Absolutely.
Yeah, sorry, my computer was going crazy. Yes, thank you again for the invitation, and I am very happy to talk to you about the Cultural Heritage Counts for Europe project and report, which is it has become a landmark study for advocacy for the benefit of cultural heritage, and therefore a successful evidence-based advocacy tool. So let me just give you some details on the project to set the scene. So the Cultural Heritage Counts for Europe report, which I will now share in the chat so that you all have it. It was a 2-year EU-funded project, so it was funded by the European Union Culture Program, so which now became Creative Europe. And it ran from 2013 to 2015. And the aims were basically to collect and analyze evidence-based research, so everything that was available and accessible in relation to measuring the impacts, cultural, economic, social, or environmental impacts of cultural heritage. As well, while doing this, identify gaps and areas for possible future research, as well as develop policy recommendations. This is very important, develop policy recommendations, because this was, let's say, the target group that at the end it's mostly using this report are actually policy makers. It was the main idea, let's say, it's cultural heritage is an irreplaceable source of economic, social, cultural, and environmental value for Europe. We all know this. I think in this group we can all agree with it. But in order to design policies and in order to allocate the necessary funding, we need data, we need convincing evidence, we need qualitative and quantitative data, because of course we cannot base the policies on only thoughts or convictions. So this was really the departure point of the study. It was coordinated by Europa Nostra, and it was co-authored together with 5 other European partners. I'm sorry, I think I'm not controlling the slides actually, or am I? Because I cannot get it moved. Okay, there we go. Yeah, so I will now focus mostly on the process, of course, because I think this can be interesting to you. But as I said, I just sent the link to the chat. So if you are interested in the content, I invite you to have a look at it. So first of all, the research and literature analysis step was the very first stage of our work, and we have a research team that started basically gathering and analyzing several and actually hundreds of studies, analysis at the international, European, regional, and local level. So this was quite a challenging step. Also, it was mostly desk research. And then the second step, which you can see in the screen, was pan-European survey. So basically, we wanted to have quantitative and qualitative data on the impacts of cultural heritage and how it's measured, as well as case studies. So we designed an online survey to basically find ways in which we could demonstrate that investing in cultural heritage is actually has an important return for Europe. So then, once we gathered this desk research and the results of the survey, we had a validation process with experts. Here, it was very important for the peer review exchanges with the European Heritage Alliance 3.3, which is an informal platform gathering around 50 heritage organizations, of which Europeana is also a member, and Europa Nostra is a coordinator. So we were, of course, reviewing the findings with them. Then we drafted the key recommendations, and here I think it's very important what Beth said about which change do we want to see. So here, of course, we needed to choose the recommendations that were more strategic and that could have a real impact and could make a change in heritage policy. Then the publication in 2015, translation, of course, to have a wider reach, dissemination both online and via events, physical events, and then using the findings, which is a process that the projects ended in 2015, but using the findings for advocacy is a process that we have been doing for ever since, and we continue doing. And I think now with the current situation of the COVID-19 pandemic, it's becoming also even more important to use these findings again and kind of advocate why do we need to invest in cultural heritage for the recovery of Europe. So the outcomes of this project were first 300 pages full report, which is online, and it was also printed. 32-page executive summary with the strategic recommendations, also printed and online. A huge dissemination work to policymakers at all levels, researchers, practitioners, heritage operators, civil society, and private actors. And most importantly, it raised the profile and understanding of the value of cultural heritage for Europe, and influenced the policy debate and policy making. And I can say that it has really become a milestone in the public recognition of the value of cultural heritage in Europe, because it was the very first kind of a study that was looking at all the impacts of cultural heritage. We see that in the past years, in the past decade or so, mostly the focus was put into economic impact. Now we see a shift towards societal value of cultural heritage, but this study was really the first one giving an overview of the holistic approach, let's say, of cultural heritage and its impacts. Yes, let me share with you some bottlenecks. I'm just looking at the time. The first one that I can mention was the geographical imbalance in the number of studies and research collected. So this was also because historically the UK has been the country that has been producing most of these kind of studies, and also due to a language barrier, we ended up with a lot of studies and research from Western Europe and not really from Eastern and Central Europe. So in order to tackle this challenge, we established cooperation with individual national experts from 11 countries from Eastern Europe. So then we organized some debates with them. So this was kind of filling the gap of what we found in the desk research. And another very important bottleneck, and I think this is really relevant for this workshop, was how to translate the findings in a clear and understandable and usable manner. So as I said before, we have a 300 pages report, so it's quite large. It was quite technical, quite academic, and here we really needed to make it more understandable for and usable for the broader audience. So how did we do this while also focusing on telling an inspiring and compelling and convincing story? Well, let me show you my next slide. Which, yeah, I don't know if you're actually able to see the image, but I will explain it and why it's a picture worth 1,000 words. Really, for this report, it's really the case, because basically the picture that you see in your screen is summarizing the whole report in just one image. So you can see in pink the cultural impact of cultural heritage, for instance, in terms of architectural language, in terms of fostering creativity and innovation, and so on. Then you see next to it the social value in blue, for example, fostering participation or social cohesion. Then you see underneath the environmental impact in a kind of golden color, and for example, reducing the urban sprawl while reusing cultural heritage. And finally, the economic impact in gray, for example, return on investment or a real estate market. So then you can see this, you have the four, let's say the four domains, and then you see how they are interconnected. So you see in the center how they are interconnected and they cannot be separate actually from each other. And then in the very center, this is leading to sustainable development when you take into account the four pillars of this impact. So this was really very useful for us, for the report to become understandable, and it also became a landmark. Actually, it became the let's say the branding of the study, and I think it's a very good example of what Nicole said about answer your research question through data visualization, because this is really what we were asking ourselves. What are the impacts of cultural heritage? Why does it matter? And why is it worth to invest in it? I am moving very quickly through this slide. Then, of course, we had to do an executive summary because the report was very dense. So here, what we choose to convey was key evidence, so data, evidence, quantitative and qualitative evidence, the 10 key findings. So what is a story that we wanted to tell? Why is cultural heritage important? And 5 strategic recommendations. We really needed to keep our priority to a very short number of recommendations. And some results, and this is my my last slide. Well, this study has really become the basis of many of the latest policy developments at EU level. For example, what you see in the screen, it was included in the decision to establish the 2018 European Year of Cultural Heritage. And in this document by the European Commission, it stated that this report should be, the knowledge gathering this report should be used as a basis for this initiative, which took place in 2018. Lastly, I just wanted to share with you a quote, which was very much guiding and inspiring also our work. And it says, "Not everything that counts can be counted, and not everything that can be counted counts." It's attributed to Einstein. And for us, it was important because, as you all know very well, sometimes the impacts of cultural heritage are hard to quantify. So actually, the narrative for us was really inspired by this quote. And thank you. I hope I was not too long. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to reply to them. And thank you also to all the panelists for their very useful and inspiring presentations.
Now, can I turn to Magda? Please, we're so curious. We have been seeing you draw, seeing you put on the lights to to keep on drawing. It's very, because you were so concentrated on your work, you didn't see that you were gradually.
Yeah, and then I just looked up, and I'm like, okay, you're more because as I'm based in Warsaw, so quite in the eastern part of Europe. The sunset here is a bit earlier than in the Netherlands, for example. So yeah, I discovered that suddenly I'm the only person which is like sitting in the dark, but I'm already have some lights on. And I'll share with you the results of my work, which are not yet final, but I think it shows more or less what we've been talking about. And I'll probably just go straight into my part of today's webinar. Am I right, Micah?
Sorry, yeah, please.
Yes. Okay, because like, of course, I can just talk you through it, but it's not how it works. Oh, I'll just, for a moment, I'll just share the visual, and I'm sure like afterwards, I'm gonna like clear it up a bit and send it to the organizer. So all of the participants probably will be able to get it later. And I want to tell you how it works, and ask you to maybe encourage you to do a little experiment. I'll just start my clock so I know how much time is left. What I do and what you just now see is the result of something called graphic recording, which is a part of a bigger thing called visual thinking. It corresponds very well with what Lorena said, that one picture tells you more than 1,000 words. What I encourage you to do is tomorrow, like, do this simple experiment. Tomorrow in the morning, I don't know if you maybe have a team meeting or just you're having your first coffee in the morning. Generally, after the night, you wake up and you'll try to like tell yourself or tell someone what did you hear during the webinar. Just try to find it in your memory without looking at any notes. And let's see what stays there. And then, after doing so, have a look at this image and try to do the same thing. And you'll just discover that it's not only a thing which is just makes the, I would say, the event more, visually appealing and just nicer, and that you have something like something to keep on your desktop, for example, just a file to remember, but it helps your brain to remember better what was said. And you will see that just looking at those tiny doodles and drawings and some text there, your brain will suddenly start to remember very well what all of the speakers said, and it would be much easier for you to just remember, like to recall not only the feelings which you had and the emotions, but just, you know, that the data, the story which you heard today. So this is just a very, very simple experiment, but it also always works. And I know that sometimes when I do graphic recordings, people just afterwards then use the visual to talk, to show them to other people who haven't been there, to tell them, oh, we talked about this and this and this, and suddenly they just, you know, are able actually to tell everything again and just to memorize better. So this is how it works. And I'm gonna work on it a bit more after we finish our webinar, and then send it to organizers so you get this for the experiment. And now I'll just stop sharing. No, that's not what I wanted to do. I still want to share, but I want to switch between mine because I want to tell you something more about the thing called visual thinking, which I encourage you to use as a tool. It's like a tool you can use in your work. And what you have seen just a second ago was just this nice drawing, and the graphic record and what I do, it's my profession. So, you know, I always try to keep it nice, neat, and I want people to just like it and think it just looks nice. But actually, I'll just switch to what is it and what is it not. So this is Anna, and what I wanted to tell you is that visual thinking and is not about having the skill of a great skill of drawing. This is Anna, and Anna was a character. It's a real story. I worked with the Coca-Cola brand, and there was this manager, one of the directors, who was responsible for HR. And this is actually his persona. He used that Anna girl, who was just a stick woman, actually. And he was sending his employees simple visuals with a bubble speech bubble and some text, and the employees just loved it. It was what I want to say. It's not about making things like beautiful drawings and be like, you know, Leonardo da Vinci, Monet, whatever. We just want to deliver with visual thinking. We want to deliver our community, like our message. And even if it's just Anna, which is just a stick woman, we get to the point. And it's also a great way to tell stories. And what more? Now, it's not about complex pieces of art. It's about symbolic elements. And now, I hope you maybe have a pen and a piece of paper, because I want you to experience it for a moment, and to start with drawing something like this, right? I guess everyone can do it. Easy. I see people starting to do it. That's just gonna be like a very simple thing. And if you have the U shape, then you just add here, here, and here, right? Just 3 simple lines to connect the shape and merge it into one. Okay, we have it. So now a little heart in the middle. Okay, I hear laughter. We're doing well. Look, and now downwards, just to like a J and L, probably. Everyone can do it, right? And look, here are eyes, brows, and what are we missing? Whiskers. That's the pop. And here we have like this super cute, beautiful cat it was easy, right? It was very easy, and that's what I encourage you to do. And if you want to have, like, if you're gonna write a report about cats, you know, you already know how to draw it. But what I like encourage you to do is just use those simple forms to just make the story more visual and appealing. And then, you know, my cat is a queen of cats. So you just add simple elements here and there, and suddenly they're very nice. Okay, but to move on, if you don't have a report or a story, you're not telling a story about cats, but for example, about something different, then a very useful tip would be, for example, with culture heritage, let's say we want to have draw a monument, for example. So what I want to encourage you to do, this is a simple thing. You go to your Google and you just type monument and the key phrase here, then I'll write it in color, doodle. And then you get just a bunch of examples, easy ones, which you can just, you know, copy, like still like an artist copy, and you don't really have to think of new ways how to draw a monument. There's going to be a lot of ideas, and you're surely be able to just draw it. What more? With visual thinking is about courage, which reminds me, like, does it look like a horse? Well, artists would say it's ugly, but you will remember it. And it shows that I delivered my message, and I'm happy with that horse. And you're smiling, you're in, like, the audience is now engaging emotionally. And that's what visual thinking is about, right? I'm telling the story, and you'll remember that ugly, okay, maybe it's not even ugly, it's just, in real life, it wouldn't stand on those 4 feet. So be courageous.
My horse looks like this, Magda. Super fat with the thin legs. So it's very realistic.
Yes, so just be courageous. And if people laugh about it, it's just great. It's great news for you because they will remember it. And that's what what we want to do here. And what more? Visual thinking. It's not, it doesn't mean and drawing. I encourage you to draw, but don't think of coloring. It's not about coloring. Like, actually, look, when I delete the layer of coloring, which took me ages to color the thing, suddenly it's more clear. And suddenly I just used a pop of color here and there, and that's what it works. Because, like, you need to use color as a tool, which helps you to show these places in your report, in your story, which you want to, like, people to focus on. So just, you know, don't color your visuals, just use the color here and there. What more? Sometimes visual thinking is totally not about not about drawing at all. It's actually can also be just a way you organize your text on a page. Here is a very simple mind map, which tells us what 2020 was. And I started it, and I went to COVID and home office Zoom lockdown, and I couldn't think of any other ideas. Does anyone have any ideas what 2020 was also about? I don't know if anyone's speaking.
Presidential election.
Okay, so I'll write just maybe politics here, right? And then I understand you meant the US, right? Like, let's make it a fast sketch, right? And people will remember and understand it. And for example, maybe, I don't know, now it comes to my mind, climate change, right? And look, with a text report, people have to read it from the beginning to the end. Maybe they will just abandon reading on the way. And it's a very linear situation. And with visual thinking, with, for example, a mind map like this, they can follow the parts that, like, they have an bird eye view, like they see it from the top, and they just can follow the topics that they want to, and go dig down deeper into the parts they're more interested in. You give them this chance by organizing visually your text. And what more? Like, for example, examples, empathy maps, layouts, which helps. This is a layout called Cornell's Notes. I'll just maybe, I can't now, while I'm sharing my screen, I can't type anything on the chat. So maybe I'll just write it down for you. It's a way of note-taking developed in the University of Cornell. So this is Cornell Notes. You can search for it. A very specific way of note-taking, which really helps to deliver messages. What more? It's also about simplicity. You just learn a couple of basic shapes. Look at this, like I made it like in a minute maybe. These are like shapes which, like, you choose sizes, you just drag and drop literally elements just from your hands to the paper, to show numbers, to highlight important parts of your story, to show the title, and to organize it visually. So it can be really, really simple with very simple shapes and still very appealing. Okay, I think I have still a minute to go. What is it? Again, the theory about theory of dual coding is like the theory behind it. Because, okay, I'm an example that it really works, and my friends call me the person who would know weird facts about everything, because I illustrate sessions about very various topics. And suddenly I, after 2 years, remember if kids should be vaccinated for pneumococcal type of virus, type A or type B, and because I drew it 2 years ago, and suddenly I still remember it. And this is the theory of dual coding. You can read about it. Maybe I'll send later the link along with my visual. It just tells you that when you combine drawings with written words, suddenly your brain just remembers better, and it makes all of those connections. Because when you hear someone tell you about a car, you don't think about the letter C-A-R, you think about the image you have in your brain. So visuals just help your brain to process information faster, and again, remember better. And I think almost final thing, just drawing on your like with your story and delivering drawings. It's handmade, and it gives the people who read it, they feel like it has a human touch. Suddenly gets very personal, and people just engage with the thing that they see. And if they engage, they're more willing to read more. They're more willing to remember better. They're more willing to share it. So it's just how it works. And this very, very last slide, your brain just loves it. And I will just now turn off my presentation to send you a link to a TEDx talk by Sunny Brown. It's called Doodlers Unite. And she explains, if you're interested, she explains how it happens that if you combine visual, drawing by hand, listening, and you experience with more than one sense at once, and your brain just loves it. So I very much encourage you to use the tool of visual thinking, draw, be courageous, and include hand drawings in your communications. And that's all from me.
Thank you so much, Magda. This was really insightful, and it is like be courageous. That's a very good one. I think that's also that counts to everything. Also, what Beth is telling us, because you know, if you are drawing or writing, you know, the ugly first draft is always being courageous and getting it out there. So thank you, really, well, as I think I also said this when we were preparing this, that it also brings my, like a decade ago, I did a neuro-linguistic programming practitioner training. Yeah, it's all about that. It's like having a synthesis in your brain in combining words with images or sounds or smells, or it's very interesting. So thank you for bringing this up. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.